You're listening to the People's Voice International News, a recap of September 1st to 15th, 2024. The catastrophic war in Sudan continues unabated, intensifying with ever-worsening cruelty. It has resulted in thousands of innocent victims and an unprecedented movement of people desperately fleeing to save their lives. Over 11 million people have been displaced, seeking refuge away from the military conflict raging in the country. Over 2 million of them have crossed borders into neighboring countries, mainly Egypt and Chad. This massive exodus shows no sign of ending, with no solution to the military disaster on the horizon. Peace talks held at a resort near Geneva, Switzerland, concluded with an agreement on famine relief, but a ceasefire was not even discussed due to the refusal of the Sudanese Armed Forces generals to attend. US-led initiatives to reach a ceasefire, open safe corridors for humanitarian assistance, and protect civilians have failed to achieve their objectives. With a ceasefire off the table, mediators focused on humanitarian issues, trying to deliver food and medicine to millions of starving Sudanese languishing in camps, schools, and makeshift shelters. Despite an agreement to open entry points at Sudan's borders, there is still no clear arrangement for proper receipt and distribution of aid. The failure of the talks to secure a ceasefire means the misery and suffering of the Sudanese people will continue. This crisis is now considered the worst humanitarian disaster in the world. Experts and international organizations report that the war has fragmented the country. Some provinces are under SAF control, while others are dominated by the Rapid Support Forces militia. 10 out of Sudan's 18 provinces are active war zones, while provinces away from the fighting suffer the strain of hosting millions of displaced persons, further stressing already meager resources. Internally displaced people are seeking refuge in the eastern and northern provinces, but unprecedented rainfall has brought devastating floods to these areas, killing hundreds and destroying crops and agricultural production. The spread of hunger and diseases like cholera add even more suffering. According to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, around 25 million Sudanese urgently need humanitarian assistance to prevent starvation. Furthermore, 80% of functioning clinics and hospitals have been destroyed during the fighting. The de facto authority in Port Sudan refused to attend the talks in Switzerland, demanding that the RSF first evacuate civilian homes it has occupied. This argument appears weak, as the lives of civilians should take precedence over buildings. The Sudan Doctors Union has issued a statement accusing international humanitarian organizations and their donors for failing to provide basic aid to alleviate the dangers faced by Sudanese children. They also accused both the SAF and RSF of deliberately obstructing the entry, delivery, and distribution of vital food, aid, and medicine. A report by the Emergency Coordinator for Doctors Without Borders in Darfur states that children are dying every day across Sudan. The Doctors Without Borders Emergency Coordinator for Sudan declared that her organization has been prevented from bringing in additional medical staff and supplies. This need has grown even more urgent due to the outbreaks of malaria and other diseases transmitted through contaminated water, leading to the spread of cholera in 5 provinces. Economically, the war has caused the Sudanese pound to plummet. Before the conflict, $1 equaled 110 Sudanese pounds, but today it is over 2,700 pounds. The war has also led to a loss of state revenue as factories, both public and private, have halted production. The agricultural sector has been devastated, with major projects being forced to stop due to the RSF militia occupation. According to the UN FAO, seed production, a staple for most Sudanese, has decreased by 45%, and over half of the working population is now unemployed. While regional and international powers give lip service to the idea of a ceasefire, they continue to meddle in Sudan's affairs, siding with one belligerent or the other, further escalating the conflict and worsening the suffering of the Sudanese people. Calling for a ceasefire without a clear vision to achieve it and to restore the peaceful democratic transition to a civilian rule in Sudan is futile. This failure is evident when US-led talks exclude the genuine popular forces that fought against and brought down the Muslim Brotherhood military regime during the December Revolution of 2018 to 2019. The forced absence of the resistance committees, the Forces for Radical Change Alliance, and the newly formed Trade Union Front from discussions about Sudan's future will only lead to repeating the same mistakes that caused the current catastrophe. The Sudanese radical forces, including the Sudanese Communist Party and the resistance committees, have consistently emphasized that the main conflict is both national and international. The central issue is the imperialist project accepted by the transitional governments. The October 2021 coup and the war that began on April 15, 2023, were tools used by reactionary forces, both locally and internationally, to halt Sudan's democratic transition and resolve the conflict in their favor. These events are a continuation of a political plan to crush the Sudanese revolution. In response, revolutionary forces, particularly the Sudanese Communist Party, have adopted the slogan, "Stop the war and reclaim the revolution" through the broadest grassroots mass front, with the goal of halting the war, defeating its political and social aims, holding those responsible accountable, and opening the path towards achieving the revolution's key goals of peace, freedom, and justice. The radical forces in Sudan have coupled their political stance with a practical struggle to achieve their objectives. Their fight is to stop the war, secure the right to live in safety, and compel state authorities to provide essential services to the people of Sudan. In condemning both warring sides, they refuse to legitimize the war and reject any compromise that would restore a government dominated by remnants of the disposed Muslim Brotherhood regime or serve foreign interests. The Sudanese revolutionary forces remain committed in mobilizing a peaceful mass struggle to defeat reactionary groups, expose their conspiracies against Sudan, and reclaim the December Revolution. They are determined to not tire in this fight. In other international news, in late August, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced significant tariffs on Chinese imports, including a 100% tariff on Chinese electrical vehicles and a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum, effective in October. This move followed a secret briefing from U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who urged Canada to align with U.S. and EU tariffs. Beijing promptly retaliated by imposing tariffs on Canadian canola oil exports, impacting Canadian farmers. Trudeau justified the tariffs by criticizing China's unfair trade practices and excessive subsidies to its EV industry, despite Canada itself also subsidizing Western and South Korean auto industries. This action contradicts Canada's goal of a green transition and reducing carbon emissions, as tariffs could hinder global efforts to phase out internal combustion engines. The tariffs may undermine Canada-China relations, escalate tensions reminiscent of a Cold War, and primarily benefit finance capital rather than protect Canadian jobs or the environment. The Communist Party of Canada urges Trudeau to rescind the tariffs and seek improved relations with China for mutual benefit and global peace. Sutures are vital for all surgeries, from minor cuts to major procedures like open heart surgery and cesarean births. Due to the blockade, importing sutures to Cuba is costly and difficult, leading to a nationwide shortage. CubaCan, in collaboration with the Canadian Network on Cuba and Committees for the Defense of the Revolution, is launching a campaign to address this critical need. The goal is to provide at least 15,000 sutures, with the potential for more. Contributions are sought to help purchase these life-saving supplies, and donations can be made by check or e-transfer to the Canadian Network on Cuba to further this cause. Bloc Québécois MP Gabriel Sainte-Marie is sponsoring an e-petition urging the Canadian government to end the U.S. blockade of Cuba. Petition E5014 highlights global opposition to the blockade, especially through the United Nations. It calls on Ottawa to pressure the U.S. to lift the blockade, remove Cuba from the list of state-sponsored terrorism, and denounce the blockade as a major impediment to human rights in Cuba. The petition also urges Canada to prevent its corporations from participating in economic sanctions against Cuba and to maintain relations based on equality and respect for Cuba's sovereignty. Signatures are being collected until October 16th. The Canadian Network on Cuba encourages widespread circulation of the petition. On September 2nd, while not an official Labor Day in Israel, millions of workers staged a massive general strike, bringing the country to a halt. The strike was led by Israel's main trade union as a protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's refusal to agree to a ceasefire in Gaza or secure the release of hostages held by Hamas. According to the Israeli Communist Party newspaper, the strike disrupted major sectors, including transportation, education, and public services. This action followed mass protests on September 1st, where 500,000 Israelis took to the streets after the discovery of 6 hostages shot in Gaza, 3 of whom were reportedly slated for release in a potential ceasefire deal. Netanyahu's insistence on Israel controlling Gaza's border with Egypt has stalled negotiations. The Israeli public, including hostage families, largely blames Netanyahu for the continued captivity of hostages since the October 7th Hamas attacks. The strike represents a significant shift in Israel's political landscape, uniting diverse groups, including the Arab working class, in opposition to the ongoing conflict. Israeli police under the direction of Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir targeted the Communist Party of Israel by closing its Haifa quarters to disrupt anti-war activities. On August 26th, Haifa's regional secretary was summoned for questioning regarding the party's actions. Following this, police announced the closure of the CPI headquarters to prevent a film screening and halt meetings organizing opposition to the Gaza war. In response, the Communist Party and the Democratic Front for Peace and Equality condemned the closure, describing it as a manifestation of fascist practices against political opposition. They affirmed their commitment to continuing anti-war activities until the war on Gaza ends. After the closure, CPI leaders held an emergency meeting, resulting in several protest actions, including a demonstration on August 26th. The Arab-Jewish Partnership for Peace Coalition also expressed its defiance, vowing not to be silenced by government suppression. Solidarity came from the Palestinian People's Party, which condemned the repressive measures and expressed confidence in the CPI's resilience in the struggle against occupation and fascism. In the post-war era, democracy in metropolitan countries has never been in a more perplexing state. Ideally, democracy should align with the electorate's wishes, but historically, governments have aligned policies with ruling class interests and used propaganda to manipulate public opinion. Today, however, a significant gap has emerged between public opinion and the policies pursued by the ruling elites, despite their ongoing propaganda efforts. This divergence is characterized by two unprecedented features: broad political consensus among the ruling parties, but a complete disconnect between what these parties agree on and what the public desires. This gap is especially pronounced on issues of war and peace. In the United States, despite overwhelming public opposition to Israel's actions in Gaza and a strong desire for the end of the Ukraine conflict through negotiations, the government continues to supply arms, escalating both conflicts. This is done with bipartisan support, ignoring public sentiment and risking broader, potentially catastrophic consequences. Germany faces a similar situation. The Ukraine war has severely impacted energy prices and living standards, yet the political establishment dismisses public demands for peace, and instead criminalizes opposition to Israel's actions in Gaza, using accusations of anti-Semitism to stifle dissent. The influence of pro-Israel funding on politics further exacerbates this discontent, with both major parties in countries like the US and UK benefiting from such financial support. The shift from manipulating dissent through propaganda to outright ignoring it marks a new stage in the erosion of democracy. The moral bankruptcy of the political establishment has disempowered citizens to an unprecedented extent, laying fertile ground for the rise of fascism and further weakening democratic institutions. The Israeli invasion of Gaza, with its horrific death toll, has prompted reflection on historical racial atrocities, including the lynching of African Americans in the US. For some, this reflection has brought to mind Ralph Ginzburg's 1962 book, 100 Years of Lynchings, a compilation of newspaper articles documenting the brutal murders of African Americans over a century. These killings, some of the most horrific in human history, echo the mass murder of innocents in Gaza today. Thousands were lynched in the US, often in public, with entire white families participating in these gruesome spectacles. The book's graphic headlines, such as "Negro and Wife Burned" and "Boy Unsexes Negro Before Mob Lynches Him," reveal the depths of racial terror and savagery inflicted upon African Americans. The ongoing genocide in Gaza and the US government's inaction underscore the need to confront this brutal history, especially in the face of current efforts to whitewash it. Ginzburg's hope was that his book would force people to pause and reflect on racial persecution, though that hope remains largely unfulfilled. This book remains an essential reading, shedding light on the culture of lynching that plagued the US for so long, and reminding us of the courage of those who fought to end it. It serves as a powerful reminder of the atrocities born from hate and the ongoing struggle against oppression. That's all for now. If you would like to strengthen working class press here in Canada, consider lending your support to the People's Voice Fund Drive at pvonline.ca/donate.